I do want to get to Bigfoot, and we're kind of like coming up on the amount of time that we committed to.
Sure.
So, um, yeah. So I know that you're really into Bigfoot. Alex and I are also into Bigfoot, but not on your level. I don't think. I think Alex likes it more than me. We do have a Bigfoot sign in our backyard. We do have a Bigfoot bumper sticker on our car.
Yeah,
Um, but I think it's more, and Alex actually gets really into watching some of the shows. I
sure.
kind of got into it because I just wanted to support her, but I don't really know a lot about, um, you know, anything based in fact or folklore, or the origins of it. And I know you've done a
Hmm.
lot of research on it, and maybe even have some stories of your own. So I just thought take as much time as you want to talk about it, and then
Okay.
we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. No,
And
I mean,
I'm
I
good.
think,
I'm good on my end. So
okay. Yeah, me too, man. I'm whatever we want to do, I'll roll with it. No, this is a topic that kind of just randomly sparked my interest. I mean, Ashley and I took a road trip out to Washington, Oregon, that area, a few years back, and we were kind of looking for some podcasts and stuff to listen to because it's like 24 hours of driving each way. Got a lot of time to kill, and we
yeah.
stumbled across, a Sasquatch Chronicles, which a lot of the stories take place out in that neck of the woods, I guess. So we started listening to them, and I just
Oh
became so
yeah.
fascinated because some of these witnesses, I think we've been ingrained. There's a couple things here. We've been ingrained that people that report on these things, there's some kook living out in the woods that, pees in jars and stuff like that. In reality, it's like, policemen, firefighters, doctors, the average everyday citizen, you know, outdoorsmen that have lived in these areas for years and in remote places, and they've had very strange experiences and so on. And I just think, the other thing is that it kind of goes back to our previous conversation, but we're kind of taught that the world is a small place and it's overpopulated, and, you know, these things can exist. And in reality, the world is huge. Every person on this planet could fit into the state of Texas with room to live. Think of that. Every single person could fit into the state of Texas alone.
Wow,
That is
man.
so
That's
much,
crazy.
right? That is
I would
mind
never would
blowing.
have thought that. I thought
No.
people were struggling to fit in India, man. I
Yeah.
really
Well,
did.
yeah. And don't get me wrong. They are. I mean, the India is a relatively speaking a small country for its population, so of course. But and I think that was like I think it was like every person could live there with like 50 square feet of living or something like that. It's like a very small, but man, it could be done type of
That's
thing.
still that kind of
But
changes your perspective a little bit.
yeah, well, it totally does. So you translate that to the globe and all of the space out there, the remote places where no human being has ever even stepped foot before, and those places still exist. So the world is far more mysterious than what we are led to believe. In my opinion, I think there's so much mystery out there that is yet to be uncovered that I think it'd blow your mind. I think it'd blow my mind, even though I'm like embracing it type of thing. So, you know, on the topic of Bigfoot, I think that's one of those things. Why wouldn't that exist? I mean, you have stories going back hundreds of years, even longer, from Native American tribes, remote tribes all across the globe that have encountered these, hairy creatures, massive giants, by the way. Why, those tribes 300 years ago probably weren't trying to gain some notoriety or fame from making up a story. It's like
That's true.
you,
No, I believe
you just have
that.
to ask yourself that. Why would you do that? And on the topic of modern day sightings and stuff, more than not, you're going to be scrutinized if you go to public with this stuff. You're not going to be like, well, I signed a book deal and got on 2020 or some TV program. Probably not going to happen. You're probably going to be questioned, and people are probably going to think you're crazy. So there's no like real gain to coming out with this stuff. And man, some of these stories are just would blow your mind. Like one of my favorite stories, and I think I've maybe told this to you before, but it's one I always go back to. And by the way, I've listened to potentially thousands of these stories at this point. So even if 1% of them are true, that's pretty remarkable. Um, but there was a hunter, a bow hunter, and I forget where it was exactly. I mean, probably the Northwest. That's a pretty hot spot, although all over America you do see this. But he was up in a deer stand. Like his the seat of his deer stand was 20 feet off the ground. So he's a
Okay.
ways up there. So he's out there hunting, early morning. He's, bow hunting as a bow hunter. I can tell you it's a game of patience and tact. I mean, you don't just show up and shoot a deer and go home. I mean, it can take days, hours out there, to even see something, let alone get a shot. So he's sitting in his stand. And I mean, when you do this, you're probably actively in your stand for many days in a row. So you get very uh, in tune with the woods. You hear things differently. You your presence is there differently in a way. But so he's kind of sitting there, mornings opening up and this and that, and you can hear birds chirping and squirrels rustling through the leaves and all the things of the woods. And all of a sudden it just goes dead quiet. No birds, nothing. Just hear a pin drop in the woods type of thing. And so he's thinking, oh, there must be a predator in here. Mountain lion, bear, whatever. I can't remember exactly what, for his area, what would have been common there. So he's kind of looking around, expecting to, see one of these critters roaming around in the woods nearby. Um, so this has really got his attention drawn in. And all of a sudden, he feels, some time goes by, and all of a sudden he feels like a little tug on his pant leg. Mind you, his butt is 20 feet off the ground. And he looks down, and there is one of these creatures reaching up and tugging on his pant leg. And
No way, dude.
he said he turned around and it kind of like grimaced at him. He was like, it was almost like, I mean, it was kind of funny listening to this hunter because he almost made it sound like the Bigfoot was like, gotcha, type of thing. But also at the same time, it scared the ever living shit out of him. So, I mean, the Bigfoot, he was like, I knew, all I had on me was my bow. This bow would have done nothing to this creature. I mean, this is so big. I mean, imagine the size of that. You know, I'm, not quite 6 feet tall.
Yeah,
And,
that's
my
three
reach
at
is,
least.
yeah,
That's three of you.
yes, I mean that's outrageous in size. So this Bigfoot kind of goes away, and he waits. He's like frozen in his deer stand. He's like, I couldn't tell you if it was 20 minutes or 5 hours. I was just like stuck in that position. And then he said, finally, could start to hear the woods moving again. Birds, the road, woodland critters, and all the things. And he was like, I finally got the courage to climb down. He said, I ran out of there as fast as I could. I've never been back, type of thing. So that's just one of my favorite stories that displays the massiveness of these creatures. And not all of them are that big. Some of them are my size or your size, but some of
Dang,
them are enormous.
that's like I've heard a lot about, hey, like we have an actual footprint and it's huge,
Yeah.
and so they'll take like a human shoe and show you how big it is, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look like it's fake. It looks like it's like a real footprint.
Yep.
Um, that's like, I don't know, one level of evidence, but a firsthand eyewitness account of somebody saying they got physically touched and then they looked down and actually saw the whole creature from top to bottom or saw its face right there. I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't. That's pretty. If somebody comes out and says like I was like, sitting in a sitting position and I saw a creature's face maybe 6 feet away from me, I mean, people basically just had to scrutinize that person because
Yeah.
people aren't going to
Totally.
believe that. So they're
Yep.
just going to come out and be like, "You're crazy," like,
Yeah.
you know. Um, I'd love to see if I'd love to listen to that podcast and listen to that like
Oh
that
man,
actual story.
yeah, I've listened to so many of his. He does one every week, and he's been doing it for years and years at this point. Sasquatch Chronicles is a great one, and then the other one I really like is Bigfoot Terror in the Woods. Sasquatch Chronicles is, I think, probably the best produced one, and the stories vary. I mean, some of these guys get the daylight scared out of them. Some of them have kind of a more peaceful encounter with them, if you will. But these creatures are very, I mean, they, I could literally, I mean, we could do like 10 hours just talking about the stories, the evidence, and all these things on Bigfoot. I mean, it's overwhelming. There's another favorite story of mine was two like I guess forest industry helicopter pilots, if you will. So these guys, if a forest fire was occurring, these guys were kind of responsible for scouting out the area, finding its path of movement, surveillance and monitoring basically from a helicopter. And these guys are veterans of this profession. They've been doing it for quite some time, and their credibility is very high. I mean, they're you know, very renowned in their field of work, you would say. And I think they had military backgrounds and stuff. And they were, this was up in the Northwest. I know that one for sure. But they were monitoring a fire, and it was, kind of in a grove of trees over here. And it was kind of closing into the end. And then there was open kind of meadow slash prairie, and then another group of trees. And so they're watching it, and all of a sudden the co-pilot's like, what is that down there? And, the pilot, who, by the way, both of them are super skeptical of this stuff at the time, even though, they've heard reports and stuff like that. And they look down and they can see what appears to be a Bigfoot just hauling ass across this meadow, like from the burning grove of trees over to the next one. And they said this thing, they followed it because I think, if I remember right, it was like 300 or 400 meters in between the two, so we'll say roughly a quarter mile. But the pilot was like, this thing had to be moving about 45 miles an hour. I mean, hauling ass. And he said when
And
it,
we can't run that fast.
oh God, no, no. And he
I
said
think
it
we
was
top
just
out at like
massive.
20.
Yeah. I mean, like world class speeds, like, I don't know, 27 miles an hour. I mean, that's,
Okay.
yeah, we're not even touching that. And he said, if there was like a ditch or a ravine or a log or something, this thing cleared it like it wasn't even in its path. It would be like, if you or I were running around the forest and we had a little stick in our way, just run right over it, no big deal. He said that's what this thing was doing, and it's like almost it was gliding across that meadow, and then it was out of sight. But yeah, I mean they watch this thing from an aerial perspective, run across. I mean, they saw it for, what, 15, 20 seconds probably as it ran across that distance. And, you had two skeptics, now two total believers in it. And I mean, these stories are just, they're endless, I mean, there's one I listened, the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods. Those guys are great too. They kind of get into maybe a little more scary side of these creatures. But there was a family living in like I think it was in Montana or Idaho. Can't remember. But they were kind of living in like a valley in between the mountains. They had a cabin out there. They lived there for a few years and this and that. Well, they had, all of them had witnessed seeing a well, they had witnessed a Bigfoot at some point in time while they lived there, or some strange interaction. The howls and things they do. They've heard them before, and they're not native to other creatures in their area, so they're very distinct. I myself think I've heard one of those in Wisconsin here, which there's a lot of sightings, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But anyway, they had two grizzly bears, or no, I'm sorry, it was a mother grizzly bear and two cubs, and they were very common. They would show up on their property. I mean, there's nobody else around. They live very remotely. I believe it was a husband, wife, and two kids.
Okay.
And they would see these three grizzly bears pretty commonly. And the one day they were watching these grizzly bears because they had like, the woods were maybe a few hundred meters from their house, but it was a very clear tree line. Almost just like you had cut off the trees and then it was grass type of thing. But they would see the grizzlies in that area pretty commonly, and they noticed one day that the mama grizzly was gone, but the two cubs were there, and all of a sudden the two cubs started getting a little squirrely, and this massive Bigfoot comes in and like picks one up and starts running off with it. I mean, that just shows you the immensity of these creatures, right? I mean, just a pick up even a small grizzly bear and carry it like it's a, purse dog type of thing. Well, all of a sudden, they said that the mama grizzly bear just comes hauling ass from, it wasn't very far away, but it was running up that tree line to where they could see it. And it goes in the woods running after this thing. And he said all of a sudden it sounded like they're dinosaurs fighting in there. I mean, it was growling and snarling and howling and yelling and all the things you could imagine a grizzly bear and a Sasquatch fighting. And all of a sudden the grizzly bear just stopped and it was just dead quiet. And they didn't really know what happened. But then they saw the one cub sometime later, several times. No mama grizzly, no other cub. So the Sasquatch clearly won that battle. And again, a full size grizzly bear is nothing I want to be even like within a quarter mile of. And this thing apparently won that fight. So
Dude,
just
I feel like
interesting,
a Sasquatch versus a grizzly bear that has like marketing all over it. Like,
right?
I
That's
mean, who
all
wouldn't?
time.
Yeah, that you could make like um Royal Rumbles or that show back in the day
Yeah.
with the clay people
People would pay
fighting
a shitload of
the
money with to
money.
see that.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
people want to
celebrity
see.
deathmatch.
Yes, celebrity deathmatch. That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Sasquatch versus a grizzly bear. And grizzly
Well,
bears are totally not to be fucked with because
no,
they'll like if they
they
hit you
are
in the
the
face, you're
apex
gonna
predator.
yeah.
Yeah. And by the way,
And
that family was so so terrified by it. They moved. I mean, they not only moved out of that area, they moved out of that state entirely. They were so like terrified by what they saw.
well, and moving out of the area seems realistic if you live near a grizzly bear family. Like
Yeah.
you can't do that. But if you move totally out of the state, it seems like you're afraid of something more than that.
Yeah.
Because like if you leave the grizzly bear, like if you go 100 miles away, it's not gonna come after you. But if
Right.
you like believe there's like some type of creature that no one else is gonna believe, and that it has a brain maybe like closer to ours, then you
Hmm.
might leave for that.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I would encourage anybody. I mean, there is some just incredible footage of these things. I mean, just go look for it. You can find it. I mean, there's some notorious sightings where it's super easy to find. I mean, there's one where I think it was a Boy Scout troop. We're out in kind of a remote area, and there was like 20 of them. They had chaperones and the whole bit, and all of a sudden they can see this silhouette of what looks to be an enormous man standing up on a ridgeline, like the sun's behind it, so they can very clearly define the silhouette. And you're just walking along the ridgeline, and then it turned and started staring at him. And this thing stood there for a while. And I mean, it, when you see it, even from a distance, that's not a human being. Like,
Yeah.
period. It looks fluffy, for one, and just based on the objects around it, it looks huge. I mean, people aren't that big. So I just think it's super cool. I think there's so much mystery out there, and